Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. You know I steer clear of politics here on Dark Hearts, but I do not steer clear of cults or the discussion about people in the public eye who are involved in cults, especially when they are close to power. And as if Tulsi Gabbard was not already incredibly controversial because of her talking points that seem written by a Russian propagandist, her ever-shifting political stances, and her conspiracy theories, now we have to deal with the fact that she is an actual cult member. Yes, a woman with more power in this country than you and I will ever have a glimpse of is a member of one of the most ridiculous, dangerous, homophobic, misogynistic cults in existence today. A cult that has come under such scrutiny and whose leader is in so much legal trouble that he is currently in hiding. This is the world we live in, and it's important, maybe now more than ever, that we talk about these ideologies that are infiltrating the highest levels of government. Today we are talking about Chris Butler, not the Chris Butler from the other week in the Joe Kenda episode, but Chris Butler, the Science of Identity Foundation leader, and one of his devoted followers, in particular, Tulsi Gabbard. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. Once upon a very Hawaiian time in the 1970s, long before he was exalted with a name longer than most prescription drug labels, Chris Butler was just your average surf-loving kid from the Aloha State with a gift for persuasion and a craving for spiritual meaning, or at least the ability to control the people who craved it. Born in 1948 in the U.S. mainland, but raised in Hawaii, Chris Butler wasn't destined for a normal 9-to-5. He was charismatic, sun-kissed, and had the kind of voice that could convince you to trade in your cheeseburger for a chanting bead. By his 20s, Chris had gravitated toward the growing Hare Krishna movement, the flower-powered, robe-clad society inspired by A.C., I know I'm going to say this wrong, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This was the age of Eastern philosophy going west, and everyone from the Beatles to your yoga teacher's roommate was talking about Krishna, karma, and kale, before kale was cool. Kale still isn't cool in my book. Chris Butler fell in love with it all. At first, in the early 1970s, Chris Butler became a dedicated disciple of Swami Prabhupada. He fully embraced the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, sometimes called ISKCON, I-S-K-C-O-N, shaved his head, except for the regulation rat tail tuft, and spent his days chanting Hare Krishna and avoiding onions, garlic, and anything remotely enjoyable. We can't have joy in life. What kind of a religion is that? Chris was a rising star in the movement, eloquent, driven, and popular. So popular, in fact, that rumors swirled that he was amassing his own following within the Krishna movement. Swami Prabhupada, the actual boss of the spiritual franchise, started to get suspicious. Like a guru, sensing a mutiny, he warned Butler not to form his own off-brand version of Krishna consciousness. But Chris had his own plans. By the mid-1970s, Chris Butler had surfboarded right on out of ISKCON. He declared himself an enlightened being, so no longer in need of Prabhupada's direction. And in classic cult leader style, Chris gave himself a name that no Starbucks barista would dare attempt, but I'm stupidly going to. Jagad Guru Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa, which loosely translates to world teacher who is a swan of the ultimate spiritual perfection. Yes, really. Thus was born the Science of Identity Foundation, Chris Butler's own spiritual empire, or as critics call it, a controlling and paranoid cult hiding behind incense, and Sanskrit. From the outside, Chris Butler's teachings appeared to be a remix of traditional Vaishnava Hindu beliefs, vegetarianism, mantra meditation, rejection of materialism, and devotion to Krishna. But the further in you got, the weirder it got. Chris Butler's devotees were required to follow strict rules. No meat, fish, or eggs. No sex unless strictly for procreation. Good luck enjoying that. No gambling, no drugs, no fun, basically. And absolutely no listening to karmis, which are non-believers, especially scientists, atheists, or, God forbid, vegetarians who eat garlic. I'm not kidding. Over time, Butler's teachings took on a paranoid edge. He warned his followers about the dangers of microwaves, fluoride, stupid things like that. But then it got dark, and Chris Butler started preaching against queer people. He is notably anti-LGBTQ+. Chris also believed that Satan was a very real threat and that evil forces were trying to infiltrate his movement. Spoiler alert, they were probably just journalists. Chris Butler also demanded absolute loyalty. Devotees often lived communally, wore traditional Indian attire, and regarded him as a godlike figure. At one point, followers reportedly brushed his teeth for him, fetched his food in hazmat-like protection suits because he was afraid of germs, and built altars with his photo on it. Not culty at all. Chris was spiritual and hygienic, truly the best of both worlds. If the story had ended there, it would just be another footnote in America's long history of cultish weirdness. But Butler's legacy took a political twist. In the 1980s and 90s, his movement quietly influenced Hawaiian and national politics. Several of Chris's devotees ran for office or held positions of power while keeping their spiritual allegiance and cult membership under wraps. The most famous of them all, Tulsi Gabbard. A former U.S. Congresswoman, Democratic presidential candidate, and now political enigma. Tulsi Gabbard was born and raised in the Science of Identity Foundation. Her father, Mike Gabbard, was a longtime Butler disciple, and Tulsi grew up immersed in the group's teachings. For much of her early political life, she defended the beliefs she was raised with, including anti-LGBTQ stances. She would later claim that she has disavowed some of these beliefs, but Tulsi Gabbard's relationship with Chris Butler remains murky. She was born on April 12, 1981 in American Samoa and raised in Hawaii by her parents, Mike and Carol Gabbard. In 1983, the family became deeply involved in the Science of Identity Foundation, also known as SIF. Mike Gabbard, Tulsi's father, ran a vegetarian restaurant and raised his children within the foundation's teachings: disciplined vegetarianism, daily yoga, chanting, and a strong emphasis on loyalty and obedience to Butler, whom devotees treat as a divine figure. Former members of the cult report prostrations, reverence for his discarded food or shoes as relics. I mean, that is so gross. You're taking somebody's leftover food and worshiping it. And of course, there is extreme ostracism for dissenters. People who left the cult were not only shunned, they were tormented. There are stories of people receiving threatening letters, having rumors started about them, and having their employers contacted. Anyone who dared to disobey Chris Butler was going to face not only his wrath, but the wrath of his followers. People report being terrified of Butler and of his little minions. Tulsi grew up being homeschooled. I'll save it. I'll save the rant. She was homeschooled among fellow SIF disciples, singing Hindu bhajans on the beach and devoting much of her early life to the group's spiritual regimen. She spent her teenage years cloistered from mainstream society, including a boarding school run by SIF in the Philippines. So this is definitely somebody that is very socially healthy, connected to the public. Okay, I'll stop. And again, I'll stay off the homeschooling rant today, but just know, here I am, Always ringing all the alarm bells when it comes to homeschooling. If you've been with me for any length of time, you know I have a major problem with the way homeschooling is currently set up and the things that are allowed. You want to homeschool your kids, you should be allowed to do that, but the current system that we have is terrible. And as we see in the true crime community over and over and over again, kids are often homeschooled in order to isolate them, manipulate them, control them, and abuse them. And a lot of times, those kids turn violent. So I'll just be over here ringing my bell. Everyone can just keep ignoring the crazy old lady ringing the bell. I'm used to it. Tulsi's parents were central figures in this sect. Her mother, Carol, served as SIF treasurer. As Jillian Paramahamsa and other critics have noted, Tulsi Gabbard's childhood was heavily shaped by Butler's teachings and the group's isolationist ethos. Very much keep to yourselves, don't talk to other people, don't interact with other people. Chris Butler, and thus SIF, advocated strongly homophobic and anti-Islam views. In the 1980s and 90s, Butler condemned homosexuality as an abomination and warned that bisexuality leads to pedophilia and bestiality. He opposed gay marriage and other civil rights, casting homosexuality as evil and public schools and society at large as corrupting forces. The words that are coming out of my mouth make me feel sick. I have been a queer rights activist for 30 years. I am a strong believer in I'm trying to contain myself. I'm a strong proponent of the civil rights movement because I am an American patriot and I believe in the Constitution. And you know, I owned a very large dance school. I was a professional dancer, and that is how even my tiny Utah rural girl self in the 1980s was introduced to gay people. When I found out how they were treated, I became involved in that movement, and I've stayed involved. If you want to get on my bad side real quick, there are two things you can do. Say something bad about one of my kids, or bash queer people. Those are the two things that can still get me really angry. Well, racism and misogyny. I am who I am. It is what it is. I'm 55 years old. I ain't changing. I got a temper. It's much more under control than it used to be. So I despise this Butler idiot and Tulsi Gabbard and anyone else that is anywhere near this bullshit. I have absolutely no patience for homophobia or queerphobia of any kind, and I never, ever, ever will. I will never stay quiet about this. Fuck this woman and her whole and entire ideology. From the bottom of my heart, seriously. As a teenager, Tulsi joined her parents in public anti-gay marriage protests in Hawaii and supported ballot initiatives against LGBTQ rights. At age 20, she ran for Hawaii's state legislator along with her father, both presenting conservative stances consistent with SIF's teachings. Over time, Tulsi Gabbard's political views evolved. By the late 2000s and 2010s, she had co-sponsored pro-LGBT legislation in Congress and apologized for her earlier positions, though she reportedly retained personal reservations. Liar. Flip-flopper, fake-ass, phony grifter. I don't believe a word of her apologies. She's a bigot, pure and simple. She has proved that in the last few years. I felt that way about her when she was a Democrat, and I feel that way about her now that she's a Republican. I don't give a shit what your party is. I don't affiliate with any party. I know a liar when I see one. I know a con artist when I see one. And I see you. I see you. Tulsi Gabbard has referred to Chris Butler as her Guru Dev, using a traditional Hindu term for spiritual guide. She has publicly spoken of her gratitude for the spiritual practice she received in SIF, describing it as positive in her personal experience, even while others describe it as a cult. She's obsessed with this man, Chris Butler. She worships him. She's not smart enough to figure out that he's a con man, which totally tracks because she's working for a con man, and she is a con man. People who are sucked into that system, and there's people on both sides, they're not good at spotting con people because they are con people. They think they're all thinking on the same wavelength when they're all just out for themselves. You could say that about most politicians. People can be intelligent, which I'm sure she is, and really, really stupid at the same time. We see it all the time. Despite ex-cult members' accounts of authoritarian power dynamics, Chris Butler's alleged psychic claims and ritualistic reverence, Tulsi Gabbard has defended him, saying she never personally witnessed hateful treatment or punitive behavior from Chris Butler. The lies, the lies. This guy is a dangerous lunatic with ideology that includes explicit homophobia, actually called virulent homophobia by ex-members, and Islamophobia. His followers recount past private speeches disparaging Muslims and warning of religious conflict. Chris Butler also discourages scientific inquiry. Oh, I can't, you guys. He stresses obedience to his authority, and he promotes isolation from outside institutions like schools and media. Wow. I mean, I am sorry. And you guys know I was born and raised Mormon and had to kind of claw my way out of that. So I understand how when you're born into something, you don't see it for what it is. But how do you get to a stage where you're a 40-year-old person in 2025? I will even excuse, being an older person in a religion that didn't have the internet or didn't have access to, outside sources. But in 2025, in this day and age, how do people still believe this shit? It is something I will never be able to wrap my head around, and I can't think about it too much because I get really, really frustrated. Ex-followers of the cult report psychological harm, ostracism after leaving, loss of familial ties, humiliation for minor infractions, and belief that questioning Chris Butler would invite spiritual ruin. It goes through every religion. None of them are spared. Christians say, well, I need God to save me. What do you need to be saved from? God's wrath. I was at an activist event about 6 months ago, and this stuck with me so hard. There were about 50% men, 50% women. One of the guys that was there just kind of wasn't quite there yet, kind of on the fringes of getting it. And he kept saying, well, women need men to protect them. And we were all like, protect us from who? Oh! And then, you say things like that and you get accused of man-hating and man-bashing. Bullshit. I love men. I promise I love men, but there are very real problems. Women are often mean and judgmental and hateful to each other. Does that mean I hate women? No, it's just a true statement. You can tell the truth and not be bashing. We can discuss hard topics without being villainized. It is possible. But it's always the people that say, oh, everybody's offended by everything now, that are the people that are offended by these conversations. Oh, I don't like that old man that's a farmer down the road because he's racist. Oh, well, you just hate America. You're ungrateful for farmers. Nope, actually, I love America, and I'm very grateful for farmers. I just don't like that guy because he's a racist. But people are very tribalistic, and they want to take up for each other, rather than looking at the issues individually and having a discussion. We got to pick teams and split up and other people. Very tribalistic we are. We are. One of Chris Butler's former cult members said, I was raised to believe that Chris Butler was God's voice on earth. Questioning the leader was spiritual suicide. Spiritual suicide. There is absolutely nothing healthy about a belief system that teaches you're going to hell or something bad is going to happen to you if you walk away, stop paying money to the group, stop believing. Chris Butler has denied wrongdoing and threatened legal action against exposés. Yet media coverage and ex-members' letters to legislators and psychological accounts portray him as deeply controlling and manipulative. Sorry about your luck, guru goofball. You can't sue people for telling the truth. People have the right to tell their own story. People have the right to give their opinions. SIF has been entwined with the Hong Kong-based QI Group, a direct marketing conglomerate involved in alleged pyramid selling schemes in multiple countries. So this is how they make their money. They're involved in pyramid schemes, because of course they are. Some SIF leaders and fundraisers are on boards of QI subsidiaries. Tulsi Gabbard's campaign reportedly hired the Potomac Square Group in 2017 to mask her ties to SIF and QI before media scrutiny. This has been documented by the Wall Street Journal. Critics argue that Chris Butler groomed Tulsi Gabbard and others for political influence. Letters from longtime ex-member Anita Van Duyn to congressional leaders warned that sensitive intelligence revealed to Tulsi Gabbard might be compromised via her guru's influence. Van Duyn documented how Chris Butler supported disciples in seeking public office to advance his own ideological goals. So he's the puppet master behind the scenes, putting people in place to do his bidding. Oh, we're Americans. We've never heard of that before. Chris Butler explicitly condemned Islam and LGBTQ identities in his teachings over and over again and has never backed off that. Ex-cult members say men were called derogatory slurs, women were denigrated, and homophobic rhetoric was central to the teachings. Chris Butler reportedly opposed public education and mainstream social norms as corrupting, urging lifelong loyalty to his doctrine only, because that's freedom. Though Tulsi Gabbard later tried to reverse many of her early political positions, critics like Stanley Cohen have called her an Islamophobe and homophobe, aligned with Hindu supremacist movements overseas and aided by extremist donors. As of February 2025, Tulsi Gabbard serves as the Director of National Intelligence in the Trump administration. A cult member is our Director of National Intelligence. That checks. Yeah, that sounds about right. Her appointment raised alarm from security professionals and lawmakers, partly over her sectarian ties and lack of intelligence background. Lack of intelligence background is putting it mildly. She has none. This woman is totally and completely unqualified for the position she holds, and I would say the same thing regardless of party or who's in charge. I'm not a fan of any politician. I barely tolerate some of them. This woman was a Democrat for a long time, and I didn't like her then either. Critics have sharpened scrutiny, pointing to the SIF QI scandal, Tulsi's campaign's PR efforts, and her ambiguous spiritual allegiance. Like, she won't talk about it anymore. Because, we need less transparency from our leaders. Sources accuse her of reusing a weak password tied to her spiritual vocabulary, Shraddha, across multiple personal online accounts, raising cybersecurity concerns amid her sensitive role. Oh, what? A cult member having the keys to secure American data is a bad idea? No. Despite confirmation, Tulsi Gabbard's tenure remains clouded by allegations. Ex-followers warn her loyalty might be divided. Journalists and lawmakers argue her political journey is shadowed by manipulation. Oh, Hindu-phobic smears, her camp claims. She's hated for her religion. Religious persecution. And unsurprisingly, a lot of people remain unconvinced. Chris Butler remains in Hawaii. Reportedly in a luxurious beachfront home in Kailua, he retains leadership of SIF and continues teaching his spiritual doctrine with an apparently reduced public profile, but ongoing follower base. That's disappointing, but not surprising. Though largely removed from the political limelight, Butler retains influence over a core group of disciples, and he remains subject to scrutiny via ex-members' accounts and media profiles. Today, Chris Butler continues to head the Science of Identity Foundation from Hawaii, maintaining control of its teachings and community. Meanwhile, Tulsi Gabbard is facing an evolving political scandal. Her intelligence role, earlier affiliations with Chris Butler, and her campaign's attempt to downplay sectarian links remain under intense scrutiny. The dust has not settled. Though Tulsi Gabbard has distanced herself from the cult label, reports suggest she still maintains close ties to Chris Butler and his inner circle. Former SIF members allege that Butler helped guide Tulsi's political rise, and some of his devotees have worked on her campaigns or donated significant funds. Is she still loyal to the guru? Well, that's the million-dollar question. And Chris Butler, ever elusive, isn't giving interviews to clarify. He's like a spiritual Howard Hughes, minus the Hollywood glamour, but plus a lot of ghee. Was that racist? No. I mean, he's a white guy cosplaying as a Hindu leader. As of 2025, Butler remains reclusive. He rarely appears in public and communicates with followers through videos or intermediaries. Photos of him are scarce. It's said that even his most devoted followers rarely see him in person, like a mystical Bigfoot in saffron robes. His sect continues to operate low-key and worldwide, with meditation centers and online content spreading his teachings. Critics say the group uses deception to recruit and isolates members from outside influence. Supporters argue it's just a spiritual community misunderstood by outsiders. But really, how seriously can you take a movement that teaches the world is controlled by demonic atheists, microwaves give you spiritual cancer, and that your guru is simultaneously God's emissary and terrified of germs? Chris Butler's transformation into Jagad Guru Siddhaswarupananda, Paramahamsa, is a story that combines Hawaii's sun-drenched shores, Eastern mysticism, Cold War paranoia, and cult psychology. It's as absurd as it is fascinating, a reminder that spiritual seekers often find more than they bargain for when they hand over their minds to a man in robes. In the end, maybe the only real enlightenment is knowing how to spell his name without looking it up. I love that he has just appropriated this entire culture and chosen these words that are probably very sacred to some people to take on as his own, you know? For those born into Butler's world, life wasn't all chanting and coconut oil. It was a strict, fear-driven environment where obedience was prized and questioning the guru was spiritual treason. Many who have left share strikingly similar stories. Disciples bow to his image. Chris Butler's voice is played during meditation on a loop. And those closest to him wash his laundry by hand, considering it a sacred honor. One former member said, "It wasn't God we were worshiping. It was Chris Butler in God cosplay." His food is only prepared by his closest followers. It is cooked in sterilized kitchens by people who have not engaged in sexual activity for 24 hours. Boy, this guy sounds like a party. What a piece of shit. He teaches that atheists, scientists, gays, feminists, liberals, and non-believers are all under the influence of demonic forces. Even mainstream Hare Krishnas were suspect. Children who grew up in the cult and have since left were taught that non-devotees are slaves of Satan and that fluoride in the water is a plot to control people's minds. I'll bet you this guy has a crown chakra made of tinfoil. He discourages women from taking leadership roles and has said they are spiritually inferior. Families are split apart when someone decides to leave, and many ex-members describe living under psychological toil and constant surveillance, being told that even their private thoughts could bring spiritual ruin. Whistleblowers and investigators over the years have begun to speak out. Many remained anonymous for fear of retaliation. When Tulsi Gabbard rose to national prominence, her connection to Chris Butler was largely ignored until a few journalists and Reddit users started asking the uncomfortable questions. Her father remains a vocal anti-gay crusader, and Tulsi's own political career is filled with Butler-influenced language. The Chris Butler story is a strange, unsettling cocktail, one part guru mystique, one part fringe conspiracy, shaken vigorously with paranoia and control. His sect never reached the size of Scientology or the Moonies, but it's perhaps even more insidious for how it operated under the radar, influencing politics, damaging families, and co-opting sincere seekers along the way. For many ex-followers, leaving SIF means learning to think for yourself once again. One former member put it best. He said, "When I left the Science of Identity Foundation, I realized I hadn't just escaped a cult. I'd escaped a man who thought he was God's chosen germ-free middleman. You know, I wish I had something to wrap it all up in a nice, neat bow, but I don't. This is where we're at. We should not allow people with extreme beliefs into leadership positions or powerful positions. People are free to believe whatever they want if they are adults, but the rest of us are also free to exercise our discernment and choose not to allow people who harbor bigoted, unscientific, and untruthful beliefs into positions of power. We're not being listened to at all, and we haven't been for a while. Many people have raised the red flags when it comes to Tulsi Gabbard, and nothing is being done about her or many others like her. Bigots have no place in American government. The Constitution does not allow it. Liberty and justice for all isn't a suggestion. It's the foundational concept on which this country was built, and anyone who has no respect for the virtues we hold sacred has no place in our government. That includes Tulsi Gabbard, her homophobic and xenophobic views, and her loony surfboard riding wannabe prophet god. It's time for a return to sanity, my friends. It's going to be a long road back under any circumstances, but the very least we can do is start by getting rid of people who believe microwaves and garlic will kill you and that other people don't have the same rights as you and I do. I mean, that should go without saying, but it's 2025 and the world has gone mad. Ooh, I can't wait for the SIF people to find this one. It might be a week, it might be a year, who knows? You can see how much it bothers me when I do these cult episodes and they come after me. It doesn't. I don't care. I'm going to say what I have to say in my community, and the people who connect with it will stay. I'm old, I'm ornery, I'm packing, and I'm calling out all the nut jobs, at least here on my Little Dog and Pony show. It might not mean much in the world, but if we all do a little bit, that turns into something big. I love you guys, and I appreciate you joining me, especially for my ranting episodes. Listen to my podcast if you'd like. It's on Apple and Spotify. I post brand new episodes every Monday and Wednesday. I'm excited to talk with you in the comments on this one. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.